Two brothers, Oliver and Walter Smith, embarked on a familiar dive into the treacherous Devil's Spring system in Florida, expecting a routine exploration. But their plans were abruptly derailed by the unexpected arrival of another dive team, eventually leaving Walter stranded and alone in the depths. With his oxygen levels depleting and panic setting in, he must fight for survival, desperately searching for his brother and their friends before his air runs out. Walter Smith was always the reckless one. He was daring, impulsive, and unafraid. Born and raised in Florida, he basically lived for adventure. And nothing thrilled him more than the rush of cave diving alongside his older brother Oliver, who was a certified caver with considerable cave diving experience under his belt. The two brothers had already explored the Devil's Spring system twice before. The cave system was located deep in the heart of Ginnie Springs. The name is scary enough, but so are those of its caverns. The Devil's Spring is a chilling testament to nature's raw power and boasts three monstrous caves: Devil's Eye, Devil's Ear, and the diminutive yet terrifying Little Devil's Spring. These gaping holes collectively spew a staggering 80 million gallons of water daily, a relentless torrent that would drown a city instantly. Only the bravest, the most experienced, and certified cave divers are permitted to venture into these depths. For the inexperienced, the darkness here is absolute, a suffocating blanket that hides unseen dangers. But Walter and his brother have plunged successfully into the Devil's Springs and lived to tell the tale. They were, however, hungry for more, so they planned a third entry into the system. Except this time, they weren't alone. They were going with some friends who were eager to see the depths after everything the brothers had spoken about. Walter and Oliver had planned everything, down to the last detail. 2 groups, 2 separate dives, no risks, no surprises. The first group consisted of Walter, Oliver, and one of their friends, Sam, while the other included Dave and William. But when they reached the entrance of Devil's Spring and started preparing for their dive, they discovered another team of divers was gearing up for their own descent. This team was having a discussion about heading halfway toward the cornflakes section of Devil's Spring. This was different from the plan of Walter, his brother, and their friends. But Walter, listening in, became fixated on their conversation. He had never explored cornflakes before, and the idea of venturing deeper into the unknown gripped him. Oliver had a bad feeling the moment Walter's gaze lingered too long on the other divers. He recognized that look, the look of a man about to do something reckless. And he was right, because the next thing he heard was Walter telling them that he wanted to go solo. Right there and then, without any prior notice, Walter changed the plan. Oliver and their friends tried to convince him otherwise. They begged that he stick to the plan because diving solo was dangerous. But Walter had already made up his mind. Even with their training, a single miscalculation in an underwater cave could be fatal, not to mention an unplanned plunge into a section as deep as cornflakes. But Walter wouldn't relent. He assured them he wouldn't go far and that he knew how to manage his gas supply. Reluctantly, they agreed to let him go. They all entered the water at the same time and descended into Devil's Eye, their chosen entry point. But Walter took a different route, leaving his brothers and their friends. Devil's Eye is a monstrous circular abyss, 20 feet across, leading to the gallery and the catacombs, 2 complex but beautiful pathways that lead to more underwater marvels. It offers a safe and brief dive, but one that is no doubt satisfying for divers once they come out at the other end. Oliver and his friends were content with this, but not Walter. He was soon descending toward cornflakes. The silence of the deep wrapped around him, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of his breathing through the regulator. He had always loved this feeling, being weightless, suspended between the rock walls of an ancient world. The tunnels narrowed around him. Walls of jagged limestone pressed in, their surfaces rough but slippery. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, illuminating the silt in the water. The beauty of the cave was undeniable, but so was its danger. Walter kept swimming. 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet. His breathing remained steady, but his gas supply was gradually ticking down. He knew he had to track his time carefully. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Then, without realizing it, he did. One moment, he was following a clear path. The next, he hit a junction where the cave forked in two directions. The guideline he had been following ended here. He needed to choose the right passage to stay safe. Walter hesitated. He looked at his dive computer. He still had gas, but not enough to explore both tunnels. He had to choose one. He turned left, hopeful that it was the right decision, but the passage was tighter than he expected. He had to maneuver carefully, adjusting his buoyancy to avoid stirring up the fine silt lining the cave floor. Unfortunately, that didn't help because his movement still kicked up a thick cloud of silt, completely obscuring his vision. Walter froze, his heart pounding, but knowing that panicking would only make things worse, he forced himself to stay calm. Then he tried to reach for the guideline, but his fingers found nothing. A wave of dread crashed over him. He had made a terrible mistake. He had strayed from the guideline. In a cave like this, losing the line meant losing your way out. It was a dangerous situation, and panicking would render it even more dangerous. So he willed himself to stay calm. Walter turned, trying to retrace his path, but the swirling silt had erased all sense of direction. He kicked upward, hoping to find a large chamber, something recognizable, but there was nothing, just rock, wet and hopeless. His breathing quickened. His attempt to stay calm had failed miserably. He was in trouble for sure now, but things were about to get worse. Walter quickly checked his pressure gauge and discovered that his gas supply was running low. Another big problem. He reached out again, blindly feeling along the cave wall, hoping and praying for something familiar. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. His own bubbles were sinking. Instead of rising toward an exit, his exhaled air was slipping downward, pooling along the cave ceiling. He was in a dead zone, an air-trapping pocket where divers easily got confused. Walter wasn't heading up. He was going deeper. Above the surface, Oliver and the others had finished their dive and were waiting for Walter to return. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30, then an hour, and then even more hours. Nothing. Walter was yet to reappear at the surface. They knew something was wrong, so they called the authorities, who informed them that help was on the way. But after waiting a few moments for the rescue team to arrive, Oliver, who was already restless, decided to descend Devil's Spring. He and Dave grabbed their tanks and re-entered the cave. They headed directly for cornflakes. What they saw at first broke their hearts. The water was clouded with disturbed silt, a telltale sign of a lost diver. They followed their flashlights deeper, sweeping their beams across the cave walls, still hoping for good news. Then they saw him. Walter was floating, motionless, his body limp in the water, his regulator still in his mouth. His eyes were closed. His tank was empty. Oliver let out a strangled cry, his bubbles rushing upward. He grabbed Walter's shoulders, shaking him as if he could wake him up. But Walter was gone. Dave then placed a hand on Oliver's arm, signaling for them to leave before they too ran out of air. Back at the surface, rescue divers were already gathering. They recovered Walter's body, bringing him back to the world of the living, but too late to save him. When they examined his dive computer, the story of his final moments was clearer. Walter had gone over 500 feet into the cave. far beyond what was safe for a single diver. He had taken a wrong turn, gotten disoriented, and lost precious time and oxygen trying to find his way back. His mistake was diving alone, but what was probably his biggest mistake was steering away from the initial plan. He was clearly not prepared for a dive that deep, hence why he was likely to lose all his oxygen if he was ever lost. Let us know in the comments section what you think about this story, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this.